Hi, I'm Whitney Espich, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
Welcome, alumni and friends. I am Hala Fadel, an MBA alum of 2001. I'm co-founder and managing partner at Leap Ventures, and I have also the pleasure of serving as a member of the MIT Corporation. I will be your host for today's MIT Alumni Forum. Joining me today are three fellow alumni: Mariana Matus, a PhD from 2018 and co-founder and CEO of BioBot Analytics; Enj Fayemi, a 2020 MIT grad and co-founder and CEO of Rivet; and Warda Inam, who earned her master's and PhD at MIT in 2013 and 16. She's the co-founder and CEO of Overjet. I have to say I'm very proud of the diversity of this panel, and this makes the dive into their individual journey even more interesting and impressive. And it reflects also on the diversity you often find at MIT. This panel is the first in a series of forums for alumni and friends, focusing on various topics dear to the MIT community. And today we're focusing on the state of innovation and entrepreneurship. And we, of course, welcome your thoughts and comments on this topic. Our panelists will lead off the discussion by sharing an overview of their founder's journey to date. And we hope to hear from you as well. So please use the interface found below or next to the live stream window to comment or ask your questions. With that, I will leave it to Mariana, our first panelist, to start off the discussion.
Hello, my name is Mariana Matus. I am co-founder and CEO of BioBot Analytics, and I finished a PhD in computational biology at MIT before founding BioBot. I am originally from Mexico City, came to Cambridge for grad school, and I found my love for entrepreneurship here during my grad school at MIT. I've always loved science, but during my time here is that I discovered I could be a founder that takes out science out of the lab and brings it into the market to solve a real problem. So that's what BioBot means to me, is an opportunity to use science to solve a big problem. And in particular, we are solving the problem of how to protect communities, cities and towns across the US and globally from new emerging infectious diseases and other health threats. So as COVID-19 has shown over the past almost 2 years now, we have lots to do when it comes to public health and just innovation, bringing innovation into the space, modernizing the infrastructure, and bringing some of the cutting edge technologies that have been developed in other areas into the space so that we can not only manage pandemics like the one we are going through right now, but we can also hopefully be more preventative for future ones. Our key insight with BioBot is that the wastewater that we all are producing and contributing to on a daily basis is not waste, but rather it's a data asset, a very valuable, inclusive, versatile, and predictive data asset that is literally flowing under our feet every day. And that at the moment that asset is untapped. So my co-founder Nusha Gailey, who is an architect and an engineer, and I met as research collaborators at MIT. This was back in 2014. We worked together for 3 years, running pilots in the city of Boston, in Kuwait, in Seoul, South Korea, before founding BioBot. And when we founded the company, we didn't have a lot of idea about how to start or run a company. But now, 4 years into it, we are a company that is post-Series A. We have raised almost $30 million of capital, venture capital, as well as on top of that, we have also obtained grants from institutions such as NIH Our team is now about 45 people and expanding very quickly. And now we work with governments, government agencies all across the US at the local, state, and federal level. So we have demonstrated truly that this type of data, there's demand for it, and we are the market leader for it. So very excited to be here. We'll have time for more questions, but you know, at the high level, that's what we do at BioBot. And thank you for that. I'm gonna pass it, I believe, to Anj.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mattis. We don't have 45 people, but we're growing. I'm Anj, and I'm MIT 2020 chemical engineering, and I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. I come from a family of artists, and I came to MIT for undergrad in chemical engineering, and have been in Boston ever since. So my story is a little different in that the current co-founder that I have, we met in SAT school in Nigeria before we both came over to college in the US. Throughout my first few years, I didn't really know what existed in terms of entrepreneurial resources. I kind of had an idea that at some point I wanted to start a company, be an entrepreneur, but I was just kind of going through the first few years without much guidance. I found out about things like Delta V in my second year, things like all the resources, Sandbox. So I was a little late on that. But in the last couple of years, we started working on Rivet. And we've been through a couple of iterations and pivots, largely bootstrapped, but we eventually figured out what we're currently working on. And what Rivet is software that helps artists and creators to nurture fan relationships and sell more content and products. The key insight that we had is because there's so much in the creator space and the artist space to help people with engagement, with monetization, with discovery, artists end up using very many different platforms that are disparate and end up being like managing multiple business divisions. So what Rivet does is try to streamline that funnel and take every fan from that point of discovery to point of purchase all in one place using first-party data, which we think will be the commerce of the next decade, and empower artists with the means to own those relationships and monetize those relationships. We recently, in the summer, we did Delta V, and now just got accepted into Techstars Boston, which is really exciting, and a little bit more support to keep growing. And we've been working on this current iteration since the turn of the year. We're very excited to be here, happy to answer questions. And I'm really this is kind of a fan moment because I've seen both Dr. Mattis and Dr. Nam's journeys. So I'm really excited to be on this panel and answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Anj. I'll talk a little bit more about my story and what we're doing at Overjet. So as Hala mentioned, I was at MIT in 2016 and then graduated, stayed there for a postdoctoral fellowship as well. So probably stayed longer in school than I should have. And then joined a startup doing biomedical imaging. It was called QBio. I was leading the Boston office, first in R&D and then product. Basically from there, I changed my dentist. And that's how the story started for Overjet. I changed my dentist and got a treatment plan, which was very, very different than what I had received before. And that got me interested in why was this more of an art than a science? What was the reality? Was there disease or was there no disease? And that got me interested in dental diagnosis and complexity of it. So I basically, when I started spending more time on dentistry than I did on MRI data that I was working on in my day job, I decided to quit. And I quit my job in early 2018, wanting to start Overjet. At that time, we didn't know what Overjet will be. We just knew that I wanted to work on improving care in dentistry. And I started shadowing dentists and trying to figure out what were the challenges that they were facing day to day.
I didn't have to go too far from what I was doing previously, and was focused on analysis of clinical data. So the challenge that we started solving was the fact that clinical data, that is your radiographs and your notes, computers have never been able to analyze them because they've been in unstructured format. So anytime you've had to do anything with clinical data, you need a human. So humans have acted as data routers, data processors, data analyzers. Even if you have to make a simple query, you can currently make a query of how many patients with cavities are present in my practice. Like that kind of basic ability does not exist. So what Overjet does is we use computer vision and natural language processing to take this unstructured data, take this radiographs and notes and convert it into structured data such that we can now query, computers can analyze it and the easiest one we start off with is detection of disease. And then if you can start to detect disease, you can start to look at progression of disease. You can start to look at outcomes. You can start to add layers on top of it and start looking at confounding factors like medical conditions, etc. So there's a lot that can be done once you have this ability, and that's the basic infrastructure that we've been building for dentistry, and then providing a lot of applications. So with that, we've raised our first round in 2019. So MIT 14 Fund was the first investor in Overjet. And with that, then we ended up building our first prototype, got a few customers, and one of the customers now publicly announced it, but we got some large insurance customers, like Guardian is one of our customer, Delta Dental, others are our customers as well. And they started utilizing and automating claim processing, which was a manual task before Overjet and required human review of x-rays and notes, and now it can be done automatically. With that, we raised an additional, we raised a Series A round as well, so in total, we've raised about $35 million and have been focused on bringing this technology not only on the payer side, but also on the provider side. For that, we got our FDA clearance about 4 months ago as well. So not only are we now, processing claims for a significant amount of the population, so we're now serving majority of the dental insurance companies and have about 75 million members that are being served. And on the provider side, we're the first and only FDA cleared product in the market as well, and serving a lot of dental practices too. With this, I think there's a lot to be done in the future, but we are excited of bringing this trust in the market for between the payer and providers, and allowing them to provide the best care for the patients themselves. Thank you.
Wow, these are really very beautiful, inspiring, and at the same time humbling stories. Very, very impressive. If I may ask each one of you, if there was maybe a person, a mentor, or a moment, an inflection point in your journey where that was a key milestone for your company and maybe for yourself, and if it is part of the answer, if you can maybe highlight how being part of the MIT community helped. Maybe we start again with Mariana.
Absolutely. I think for me, actually, coming to MIT was a very life-changing moment, and it really put me on the path towards founding BioBot. Before coming here, I had been really growing as a scientist, right? I had already completed my undergrad studies. I had already been selected to go to Europe, to the Netherlands and the UK to do a master's on fellowship with the Mexican government. And I was really training as a scientist. And up until that point, I knew that I didn't want to be a professor in a university, but I didn't know how to use my skills and how to use my career as a scientist. So coming into MIT for me was a very intentional decision. I was actually accepted in a bunch of different, very prestigious programs, both in the US and in Europe. And I came here because I felt that I would be able to diversify my career options as a scientist. And indeed, during my first year, I actually began to attend hackathon events just organized by the community, pitch competitions, entrepreneurship classes. And I realized that's what I wanted to do with my career. I realized I want to be a founder. I want to be an entrepreneur. And in particular, I want to commercialize like science, right? I want science to be the driving force behind what I do. So I think it was maybe not necessarily a single person, but more the ecosystem and being surrounded by a lot of people who were passionate about entrepreneurship that made me choose that path.
And what about
Same
you?
order? Okay, I can go. For me, it was in 2018, I think. I don't know. I just not randomly, I just made a decision to, something must have happened that year, but that was when I started really taking seriously my entrepreneurial journey and actually trying to see what it would take to figure that out. And I heard something interesting recently about how until you've earned the right to do things differently, there are playbooks and things that you need to follow. And one of the big learnings over time for me was the structure required to actually do entrepreneurship and what had been validated and in place before, and basically rules to follow and how you could increase your chances of success. So 2018, I did a study abroad program where I took a lot of business classes, and then I came back for January. I did start MIT, which is basically just a 3-week program in IAP where a lot of people just come talk to you about entrepreneurship put on by the Martin Trust Center. So from that, I met people at the Martin Trust Center. I found out about all the resources, the venture mentoring service, the sandbox, and just what was in the universe of helping students do entrepreneurship. And after that, I just started aggressively using all of them. I didn't even necessarily have an idea, but building relationships, going to things that I didn't really need to be at, and applying to competitions, pitching. And at the turn of the next year, I actually started using the resources from Sandbox, from the Trust Center, and that put us on a path to start writing things down, at least just what actually is the idea, how does this work, and iterating and getting people that were sort of friendly faces and mentors. So there's not one person, but it was that inflection point. And that was where I started to take it seriously. And through pivots that had already started just like writing down, rethinking your assumptions, and getting into a good cadence of talking to people more experienced than you. That put us on a path to eventually, or put me on a path to eventually taking a lot of the entrepreneurship classes. And those were also really helpful for being exposed to like-minded people on campus and seeing other projects that people were working on. And through that, we eventually then did Delta V, which was just more like actually now trying to see what is it like to be day-to-day working as an entrepreneur and what does that entail. So I think that's kind of been my progression and what's kind of helped on the way, but it was definitely that inflection point, finding out about the resources that existed, and then following through times when stuff wasn't working, through different ideas, to eventually having the frameworks built and the playbooks that I could kind of fall back on to execute on what was a better idea than all the others. So, but maybe not the best idea.
Yeah, and I think for me, similar to Mariana, was very, very involved in entrepreneurship while at MIT. But to your question of like, was there some person or others who played a critical role here? You know, I was sharing an Uber ride with. This is pre-COVID, you know, was going between Harvard and MIT, and the person who sat next to me was a MIT Sloan alum who I had met before, and we just like started chatting, and they said, okay, what are you doing? And this was early days. I'm like, oh, I'm like looking into doing a startup in dentistry. And he's like, oh, I have a friend, you should meet that friend. And that friend ended up being our first investor, also became the first like clinic that we got data from. And so it ended up, I don't know if they know this, but they actually played a critical role in when Overjet started. So throughout the journey, I think, a lot of MIT people have played these like step change events in the company.
Great. So I'll just take this opportunity before asking the next question to remind the audience to post their questions in the interface below or on the side of their screen next to the live streaming window, as we welcome questions from the audience as well. So maybe related to the earlier topic and on something that's really dear to my heart is expanding access to entrepreneurial resources for all. So how has your own story been a reflection of your own drive to improve or change the world, or maybe at the same time a reflection of your family or your community's passion for equity and belonging? Mariana, you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, my upbringing absolutely influenced what BioBot does today. I grew up in Mexico City, one of the most populated cities in the entire world, and a prime example of kind of the challenges that urbanization brings. And just when it comes to environmental health, to public health, it's difficult once you reach that type of overpopulation. So I always, growing up, I always wanted to reconcile two things that seemed to be pretty separate. One, my love for science, my love for, just like the deeply technical science innovation that can happen in a lab. At the same time, my personal commitment to make an impact in the world and to use, my skills, to use my time, my intelligence, my effort to make the world a better place. And I think that, through my studies, those two pieces seemed to be pretty apart from each other and almost as if they couldn't coexist. But then at some point, I realized, again, through entrepreneurship, that I could choose to work on a big societal problem that allowed me to kind of integrate them and bring them together. So through my entrepreneurship activities at MIT, I also got exposure to many different types of startups and, like, if you will, trends in personalized medicine and others. And I think for me, again, like BioBot really checked the box of, if we do this, if we build this company and we are successful, we are going to benefit like society, like just in general. Like, this is not even just about specific patient populations or, which of course that is very important. But to me, that piece about connecting back to my community was really, really important. And just something to notice is that actually I'm the first member of my family to go to grad school, to go into scientific career, and now to go into entrepreneurship. So from that side, it's also really great to know that I am serving as an example for, even for my immediate circle that has never been exposed to any of these type of work before.
I nominate Dr. Anam to go next.
So I think for me, it has been probably the projects I did while I was at MIT, the topics I did. I am driven by having an impact, and that is something that, any work I've done has that as a very, very important aspect of it. I don't think I can go and work on something which I don't believe is having a very big impact in our lives. I did try. I tried to work for Apple and others, and and just that's something that I don't think I can work on, and made a conscious effort to move into healthcare because I felt technology can play a major role in improving health outcomes for people. So that's how I started and have been focused on trying to build technology and build companies that can have a huge impact on our lives and improve our lives and use cutting edge technology to do so.
Okay.
For me, I grew up doing a lot of musical things when I was younger. My dad's an artist as well, so I come from that. And when I think about starting with my why and why Rivet is so compelling to me, why I'm motivated to keep working on this, it's to help build a proper business building framework for all creative people. And I don't think that one really exists now that does that really well. And that's what drives me being an artist myself, having grown up as an artist and seeing artists around me. And I think that that very much speaks to the stuff that I was interested in growing up. But also when I came into MIT, very focused on technology, like figuring out how I could merge that passion for like music and creativity and also my other passions for entrepreneurship and technology. And I think that through Rivet, this is the best way I've found to do that, and just keeps me excited every day to continue pushing towards our mission.
That's great. So I'm going to ask you to reveal another one of your secrets, maybe around, how to inspire innovation, especially within your own team, with your own partner. So how to keep this mentality of innovating alive. So how do you do that among your own companies and teams? Can you give us a few tips? You want to start, Ange, while you're at it?
Yeah, I could go. I think consistently what we is consistently rethinking our assumptions. The notion that helps us a lot is that while there's other stuff out there and other competitors, there's inertia is always your biggest competition. And like, why will people, instead of just like keeping things as is or doing something that is okay, do what you're doing? And that changes over time. So you need to keep listening to people, and that's people who use it, keep looking at trends in industry and in the world. And we have exercises around that to continue rethinking our assumptions about what is the value proposition, what is the key thing that people are getting out of this, why this versus other things. And I think building a culture around that, not just haphazardly, and building some sort of cadence around that, has really helped us to continue to be just in that hack mindset and that iterative mindset. And that for me is innovation. To me is being nimble to address the thing that you're trying to solve. And I think that that's what helps us do that.
I think for us, because, and I think probably most of the companies here, we're doing something that has never been done before. So every day we're innovating. And the good thing is we don't have to, instill this, because everything we're doing hasn't been done before, and we're trying to do it in the best way possible. I think what we're trying to do is bring some more process, and what we're trying to engineer is the other stuff, such that we can have repeatability, more robustness. But I think just by the at the stage we're at, I would say there is a lot of ideas and a lot of ways of how we can do things and how we can make a difference. And it is about how do we focus on a few things and not look at all the shiny objects that exist around us, and how do we build process, etc., to scale it up. And I would say it's kind of the other way that big companies don't have a challenge with, but we do, and we have like different problems to be solving.
Yeah, to me, this is such a important question. As a co-founder, as a CEO, I feel like there's at least 3 sources of innovation in the team. So one of them is coming from our customers, what they say, what they think that they need, right? That's like a source of ideas and how to improve things, a very important one. Another one is what the co-founders and the leadership have in the right as their vision, right? Like, oh, this is how the world is changing. This is how the market is changing, and this is how our company needs to adapt to that. And I think the third one is more like bottoms up through the company culture. Basically what our scientists and other members of the team think as ideas, improvements, to challenge kind of the status quo about how we operate or how we build our product. And similar to what Warden was saying, is that I think the challenge is also, how do you balance all of that innovative force, which of course you want to foster. You want to have a team that is scrappy, innovative, always wanting to improve things. On the other hand, you want to build a scalable organization that can repeatedly build and sell and all of that. So it's like a balance about, how much like the ops and like, do you invest on ops and scaling and making things that you already have work well versus completely new things that have the potential to just change your position in the market or like your product, open new markets, new customers, things like that. So it's like, I find it a very fascinating problem and something that we are constantly back and forth, literally on a per quarter, if not more frequently basis.
So Mariana, I have a question from the audience that's a bit related to this point about, recruiting and scaling. But it's more related to attrition and maybe specifically at the beginning of the life cycle of a company. So is any one of you still worried about attrition? How was it when you started a company? And do you have some ideas on how to limit this attrition rate?
So when we started, I would say 2 years in, we had nobody leave. So, and we thought we were the best people in the world where, nobody, that wasn't a thing because of course, like the early people coming in, and the first person who left was in COVID. When COVID happened, they were going through a personal issue, etc. So they, they left, etc. So one is, I think, the internal company, and then there's the customers themselves. So with the internal company, I think COVID has had a big impact on it. I think there's more attrition in general in the internally as well than ever before. We are hearing the great resignation and other terms like this that we have to take very, very seriously. And then then you have the customers and making sure that there's no attrition there. But so far I would say it's something that we look at both internally and externally and focus on and try to make sure that we have the best culture and the best product out there.
So I have a number of questions coming from the audience, so I'll try to be a bit more
add
dynamic.
a little piece there also if you want.
Oh yeah,
on the last question.
On attrition, yes,
yeah.
Go ahead, Ange.
I think definitely for Gen Z, everyone is seeing that people don't typically work 2 to 3 years at places anymore, and it's closer to like 18 months. So that's definitely a big trend that is happening. And I think also I can speak for like very early stage, like you're always worried about attrition. And a couple of things that at least I've heard and seen more recently is making sure that you bring on the right mindset. And there is a mindset when you're like series D, C, D, E, that's different from a very like 0 to 1, 0 to 10 mindset. And there's people that work well at those different stages and the incentives are different. So hiring like a DE person when you're really early probably won't work out and will increase your rates of attrition. So I think in terms of just actual tactically interviewing or just bringing people onto the team, there are filters for things like incentives, for past experience at places like that, because it's also a very good indicator of how people deal with the pressures of that stage, and also just filtering for alignment with the mission, which ultimately is going to be the main driver, because ideally at that stage you can't pay them what they would get if they went to work at a really big company. So really, like, there's a notion of they value your equity. They're not looking for a big base, and like they think that that's something that could be successful, and they believe in you and what you're trying to do. And those sorts of filters, I think, very early on are super powerful for mitigating against attrition.
So you're nodding, Mariana. Do you want to add anything to that, or?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that perspective of, like the hire slow, of like make sure you have all of your filters, cultural filters in place, so that the people that you bring early on ideally can be with your company for the next like 3-4 years. And they are really the founding team. And then later on, I think that it's more normal for attrition to stabilize at some number, right? But I think early on, it's important to protect the company, and similarly to fire fast. If you made a bad hire, just get them out of the team as soon as possible. We had an experience like that early on, and it was very difficult for the team, but in the medium to long term, so much better to just let go of a person if they are not a good fit.
Saves you money and time and energy.
Great. So moving a bit topics here, again from the audience, and a question that relates to me also as a Sloaney, a yes or no question. Is there any stigma in your experience against founders who don't have an MBA? Ange.
I wouldn't say specifically stigma, but I definitely do feel like there's a lot more stuff that I have to answer for being a first-time founder, for being much younger. And I think those ways to address that is just doing internal, like, personal development work to know the things that an MBA would just know by virtue of their education. And that's like being able to at least speak in biz terms, be able to explain your business in the ways that's why I talked about playbooks earlier on. I think the stigma comes from people who like just don't have any experience with set playbooks, and it's very clear that you don't have a like business background or can speak that. So I think what's helped me was taking those classes, reading the books by people who have MBAs, talking to MBAs, and basically having like an honorary MBA. And I think that typically is enough. But in terms of like funding, I don't know if we are going to talk about that, but as an MBA, if you're like raising a small angel round after you're done, typically investors can probably be your classmates, and then that streamlines at least like getting you off the ground. That doesn't really exist if you're, say, undergrad or some other type of student. So that's another thing, but I don't think that that's really a stigma. It's just there are benefits to both, and I just thought I would highlight some.
Great. So we are going to talk about fundraising, but maybe before getting into the tough questions about fundraising, I'll take a question from an alum, a class of 78, William, who asked for your specific enterprise. For what specifically did you use the first investment capital? So where did the first flow of money go? This first check, where did you spend it? Warda, you want to start?
Okay.
Yeah, so it was for salary, and we hired our first person, and contrary to what Ange was saying on not hiring, people who are like coming from like larger companies and like wanting to do that stuff. Our first hire was an executive from an insurance company who was leaving a ridiculously high-paying job and joining us. And that was probably one of the best decisions we made because they were able to get us into insurance companies very, very quickly. And that would have taken us a long time if we did not have any insider from that world. So that's where the first money went, and it paid for itself very, very quickly.
Yeah, for us, similarly, like give ourselves a salary, make our first hire, and then we basically developed and launched our first commercial pilot for the product with that first capital. So with that, we were able to show that there was a customer who wanted the data. We went out there to North Carolina to set up the pilot, and with like those early successes, we were able to raise a larger seed round.
Great. So one used it on salary and the other one to get a client. Excellent. Yeah. So maybe the tougher question about fundraising. So tell us the truth. How much time does it take? How tough is it? What if you give us maybe 1 or 2 bullet points about your highlights in the fundraising process? You want to start, Mariana?
Sure. I think that the main challenge, or like my high level takeaways about fundraising, is number one, like obviously, like there's a lot of capital out there. So if you have a startup, like absolutely think about venture capital for your startup. Like my co-founder and I, for example, we had been in academia our entire life. So we didn't have personal savings to support like a company or to bootstrap. And like venture capital was absolutely like the best, decision and option for us. And, it's obviously like one of those things that people complain about, but at the end of the day, it's a very great resource that we have available. If we are in the US, in a top city like Boston, coming out of a top institution like MIT, like you have venture capital available, and like you should make use of it. Second, I think is that it's a process, and when you are in the middle of it, it becomes like the full-time job of the CEO and maybe also the other co-founders. And that's a part that can be very frustrating, because you have a company that you love and you have so many things to do with the company that you love. And somehow you need to step a little bit, like a step back, and like deal with this fundraising process. And it becomes your full-time job for a few months at a time. But something that is very valuable out of it is like taking that step back, talking to new people about it, getting feedback about your approach can actually be very helpful in kind of reevaluating your strategy and your milestones and your plans. So, silver linings, there are silver linings to all of this. And obviously, like the third is that we need so many more founders to come and, use venture capital as a resource. I think that, I want to see more scientists, I want to see more engineers, I want to see more immigrants, and like, diversity of founders out there raising capital. And there's a lot to be done. So it's still a little bit of a very close type of ecosystem, but I think that that ideally is not a blocker, but a motivation for more people to try to get into it and diversify the industry a bit more.
Great. So still many questions, unless one of you wants to add on this one. I'll move to the next one.
Currently going through the process, so we'll update later.
Okay, great. So a big one, like how do you tackle the fear of failure, and how do you get the confidence that your initiative is going to be a success? It's you all did quite bold moves when starting this endeavor of yours. So where did you get the confidence from? Ange.
So there is no confidence that it's going to be a success, and I freed myself from the shackles of that, and that just allowed me to do stuff, and that is still valid till right now. I can definitely speak from a perspective of, besides the people I was actively either getting advice from or working on this with, I didn't really tell people what I was doing because of that fear of failure. like now I tell people a little bit more. Now there's a little bit of traction, there's a little bit of validation. But I was definitely one of those people who was very afraid that so far up to this point, I've just found a way to get things done, and things have always worked out. And well, not always, but things have largely worked out. And I had no idea about this, and it could very much be something that I just fall flat on my face. And that made it difficult for me to share things with family, with friends, with anyone, essentially. And I would just say, at least the inflection point for me on that was just that regardless of whether or not I share or I'm afraid of failure, like whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And I'm starting to just take control of the things that I do have in my power, which is asking for help from people who are more experienced, which is executing on the things that we say that we will do. So doing honest work, which is innovating and trying to be creative and trying to enjoy the thing that we're doing, and giving it a good, honest push at fundraising, at building the product, at acquiring customers, and doing the things that are in this playbook. And there's other, like, in especially entrepreneurship, there's so many other factors that can dictate success that have nothing to do with your control. Someone today was telling me that they built something that was really powerful but they were too early for video in 2007, and it would have been the hugest thing, but the market isn't ready. That's not in your control. There's so many things that can just happen that, regardless of if all the other pieces fall into place, can derail you. And once I understood that and really internalized that, I just started being a little freer with sharing successes and failures, because that also helps people help you, because they can see actually the real behind the curtains, what is happening. And that's how I deal with that. So it's not even necessarily dealing as accepting a fear of failure and still not allowing that stop me from doing.
So maybe I'll combine now two questions for Warda. One question is, what are some tactics you adopted to get your first early adopters? And related to that, a question that Eng asked earlier, which was, how do you get into this community of dentists around MIT? So how did you gain credibility with them and get early adopters to use your solution?
Yeah, so I think for us, because the problem was so obvious for everyone, it wasn't like I just had to discuss problem with them. And the problem was that you go to 10 different dentists, you're going to get 10 different opinions on your diagnosis. And that nobody disagreed with. And now the question is this the right solution? That we can, talk about, but we were building the solution. So with this, I would say the first dentists who got involved, they got involved because they believed that what we're doing is so important in the industry. And they thanked us when they gave us the data. Usually you have to pay for data. Here, people were giving us data and thanking us to work that we were working on this problem. So I think because the problem was so real, I had to get introduced to someone and then to chat with them about the problem, not about our solution, but about the problem. And they would be ready to, whether it was, trying our solution or giving us data or helping us develop something. I think we got a lot of people who volunteered to do so. And so that's how it started. And then that was on the practice side. On the insurance side, of course, it's a little harder because you're talking to a huge enterprise and you're trying to get the customers to get a product from a 3-people company. So that was probably a little harder. But here, it was about, again, having again, sharing with them the problem that we felt there existed, them agreeing that problem was there, and then selling to them a solution, because they had to sign all these contracts, after which that they could try the solution. So by the time the solution came, it was like months later, but it was about focused on the problem and everybody agreeing that the problem was real.
Great. So everybody agreeing that the problem is how you get your first customers. So we're reaching the end. I have 2 quick questions and then a wrap-up questions, but if you can be very short in your answers, So one question related to failure that I think we need to address because it always comes back is how do you feel free to share your idea without fearing that someone will co-opt this idea or will use it? So is it tricky to do that, or is something that you should not even think about?
So what I'll say is like the idea you can share, but if there's some secret sauce, don't share that. But we've been open about sharing what we're doing. But there's like a lot of the secret sauce we kept for a very long time till we had to share. And that's how we got ahead with what we're doing.
Okay, any one of you, maybe Mariana, did you use any free legal clinic or advice like the BU Law Clinic or?
Yeah, so lawyers are something that you need from day one or day -1 to incorporate your company. So we went with a lawyer that offers pro bono services to new founders, and then only after you raise money you kind of settle back the bill that you owe.
Okay. Then maybe a wrap-up question that you can, all of you, answer quickly. What is your biggest challenge today at the state you're at within your own company? What's your biggest challenge, and how can maybe this audience help?
So for us, absolutely the biggest challenge right now is hiring. We've raised another large round, which hasn't been disclosed yet, but we are hiring very, very fast, and we're hiring every role. So if somebody in the audience is interested in working in a fast growing startup, absolutely, please reach out on LinkedIn, on email. It is my first and last name that you can find on LinkedIn. If your friends are interested, please let them know. But hiring is a big issue for us.
Benj.
I would say biggest thing right now is, like Dr. Matas talked about, going through that fundraising process, that additional full-time job while growing an early business, growing the team. So some hiring as well, similar to what Dr. Nam mentioned. So I would say that sums it up. And just very quickly, ideas. Nobody can help you if they don't know your idea. So like, unless you, like, the difference between good ideas that work is execution, and no one, like, you'll execute differently, but if people don't know what you're working on, you can never get help, and that'll just put you behind from the start.
Great. Mariana?
Yeah, similar to what Warda mentioned, it's growing the team and hiring talent. Right now, we are hiring across the board for scientists, biologists, chemists, data scientists, computational biologists. We're hiring a lot of engineers, software engineers, and we're also looking for talent on the more like company building side, more like, you know, people ops, recruiting, all of that. So huge challenge, especially in the age of COVID, where so
out of curiosity, how many of you are working remote? Is it fully remote, partial remote? What are you implementing?
We are remote friendly. We have an office. Our HQ is in Cambridge. We have an office in New York City as well, but we are remote friendly. So we also have about 1/3 of the company right now living elsewhere.
Great. Well, thank you all very much for this really very insightful panel. I will remember that hiring and fundraising are the two biggest challenges you face at this stage. Thank you very much. And it's, as I said at the beginning, the first of a series of panels that the MIT Alumni Association will be doing. And on behalf of the MIT Alumni Association, I would like to thank you all for tuning in. And thank you also to our panelists, Warda, Eng, Mariana, for their time today. We have recorded this broadcast and we'll make it available on the MIT Alumni Association YouTube channel within a week's time. And please feel free also to send back feedback about our today's event to alumniforum@mit.edu. A reminder also that you can find additional innovation and entrepreneurship events and resources at the event site, alumni.mit.edu/forum. And for those joining us live, please join classmates and friends in the online social hour that will follow immediately this, live streaming. We'll post the link in the discussion now. So thank you again and see you all again soon.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.